Well, what you've given me is an insurmountable task to attempt to relate to you exactly what you'd like to know. So, why don't we make it easy and let me tell you some things that I know, and then you see if I'm right. And the way you'll find that out will be to judge me. And that's really quite all right with me. If you wonder what this says, it says reserved for staff. It's my notes. Once I was doing a seminar and I had a piece of paper, and I can't remember where it was now. I think I was in Miami. And I kept referring to it periodically, and the people kept wondering, because usually I talk without notes. They think I have them, but they're not on paper. They're written in the air, and sometimes they're written over here and over there. So you see me looking around, I'm just looking to see where the next notes are. They haven't learned how to number them or draw arrows to them, so I have to find them. It keeps it exciting for me, too. When I got through, I took the card and just put it down. And somebody was going to write up the seminar for the movement newspaper. And so they immediately ran up to get my notes, and they were blank. And that person still today just wonders what on earth happened. When they hear this tape, they're going to realize that I know what they did. But up to this point, which has been 2 years, they're not too sure what I did. Oh, I don't want to put my notes too far away. Have you heard the old saying, let go and let God? Anybody not heard that previous to when I just said it, I mean? Yeah, well, let go and let God is an old cop-out cliche. And that's like, if you can't do it and there's no way you can make it work, you say, well, I put it in the light. I'm going to let God handle it. And then you hope that God handles it. Usually he doesn't. Have you noticed that? Yeah. And you say, well, but then I lose faith in the light, and I lose faith in all these teachings, and I lose faith in everything. And I say, well, what's so valuable about faith? What's so worshipful that we have to have faith? Why don't you just observe, find out what goes on, and get that knowledge? Then when you get that knowledge and it works, you can believe it. Then if you want to exercise faith that you can do it again, go ahead. But if you can do it again, then that becomes scientific in the premise. And so a lot of the times in what we call MSIA, moving of spiritual inner awareness, we bypass faith. And in one way, not to be condescending towards what we call churchianity or churches, but where they start out with first faith, we start out with first acceptance. And they say, but you must have faith. We say, no, you don't. And then they really want to start fighting you. We say, well, you can first pick up a pencil and dial the lead up and write it to see if it works. And they say, well, no, first you have to have faith before you'll even pick it up. I said, no, first it has to be there before you'll even pick it up. And so the first process is observing. It's the very first process. You observe. When we come to that point in our lives, when we say, I'm just going to let go and let God, there is a procedure. And please, I'd like to explain it to you. Because the great teachers who have come across the planet, and great not because any of us sit here and say they are, but they are, just because they are that they are. And if we can recognize that, we're further ahead, because then we don't have to fight them. One thing you have to do in following with me is to give up, if you will, all of your sets, your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions. Not throw them away, but you see, if I don't use your teacher's name or the Lord you've worshipped, then you may think that therefore it isn't valid. And I may deliberately not be using their name because you're the only one in the room tonight that follows that particular teacher, and I'd rather alienate you than the rest of the room if we're going to alienate. And I really can't do that without alienating myself. And so rather than to do that, I sort of move out of classification and category. And I come down to this whole thing of like where you are inside. You, as whatever name you want to call yourself, or what other type of status symbol you want to give to yourself. You want to call yourself rich, that's fine, be rich. If you want to be a sadhu or a sage or a rishi, just knock yourself out, that's just fine. If you want to be the local avatar or something like this, it's like, great, we'll support the local avatar. We have no compulsions against supporting and loving anyone who is attempting to bring themselves into a greater balance, even if they do things that appear to be wrong. Because it happens to all of us. Often we've had such good intentions, and the old cliches, but the way to hell's paved with good intentions. And I say, yeah, and some of you got a 2-lane highway going, and that means that you haven't been paying attention with your good intentions. And they say, well, but I've been letting go and letting God. I say, well, what do you do when you let go and you let God? I say, well, I say, okay, God, do it. And I say, well, that's a good way, but is it a God way? And they say, what's that? I say, well, does God do that? It's like, well, sometimes. I say, well, what does he do sometimes that makes that work? Or what do you do sometimes that allows that to happen? What is the magic? And so we say, well, the way to do this is we stop if we're going to let go and let God, and we get out of the way. It's like, well, how do you get out of God's way? And the answer's got to be, well, I watch what I do. Now, there's the key to letting go and letting God. And we can do it in one word, observation. Instead of getting so involved immediately with our emotions or our thought processes of what should or shouldn't be taking place according to some great teacher or some idea we've got, we sit back and we say, I'm just going to observe what you're doing. Now, it's quite true that if I could get you just to observe mentally and auditorily for 30, 40 minutes, you would start transcending the limitations of your personality. Because it is by observation that we get free. Sometimes we think we get free by involvement, but it's evolvement that gets us free. Often the involvement means that we have to go through a revolution in order to evolve again. And so we find ourselves always out of balance with a state of being inside of ourselves that we've set up as some form that we like. And I say, but you see, that's already not observing, that's setting up a set inside of you that you must follow. It's an error. And that error is produced out of the ego. And that ego will produce it out of all the dross that we've picked up through emotionalizing and mentalizing in this lifetime or in some other existence. And it accrues around us, and that we think is positive, we attempt to put into the soul and follow that. And that is negative, we try to send to hell and forget about it. But that's a judgment. That's not letting go. That's categorizing and placing in, we're going to fail. The strange thing is that people fear success. They fear to be successful financially or in a marriage pattern or raising children or spiritually. They fear success. Why would they fear success if they have let go and let God? They haven't. They have not let go and let God. They keep meddling and interfering. And so those actions of energy come to us, come out as the ego pattern of assertion, Not psychological assertion as a thing of taking care of yourself, but that process where it does not take into consideration anyone else and just asserts. It's the one where you're telling them about the houses on fire that they're living in, and they're so rapidly talking to you, they won't shut up or listen long enough for you to tell them your house is on fire. They must continue on with their trend until they come to the bloody end or the burnt end. And then when you say your house is on fire, then they have that unmitigating gall to turn around and say, well, why didn't you tell me? You know, and you say, but I was telling you. And then the ego is again, but you didn't tell me. If you would have told me, I would have known. And so you say, how do I talk to this person? How do I relate to this person? You know, and the answer is very carefully and very rapidly. And sometimes you say, shut up, your house is on fire. Or you get up and go to the situation. And often these are looked upon as being unmannered approaches. But you know, it's like, do you want good manners in a burnt down house? And so we start sitting back and we start observing inside of ourselves. We say, well, you know, if this happened and that happened, and we just observe, we think, well, what would I do? And the answer comes into you by the process of observing. It just comes in, but the difficulty is it isn't what the ego wanted. That's the truth. It didn't want the house on fire in the first place. It didn't want that in the first place, so therefore it's not going to be concerned about putting out a fire that it didn't want to be involved with anyway. And the house burns down, and then the ego, not being able to feel the success, starts to feel the guilt. And then it goes into those funny thinking patterns like, but if I would have watched, well, maybe it's my fault. Oh, gee. And then we start going through this depraved thinking. Oh, it was my fault, and I burnt the house down, and where will we sleep tonight? And I was wrong, and oh my God, what will they say? And the insurance will cancel, and I'm a negligent person. And then comes along another chance for success. You say, well, if I do that, though, because I'm moving on my ego to do that, something will happen. I don't know what. Something will happen, and it'll happen again, and then I'll have another failure, so I hadn't better do anything. I'm just going to let go and let God. And God says, but I'm using you. You say, don't use me. I don't want to be used. Use them. And so we start laying the old commandments against the God form. And yet we say, what does God look like? And a lot of people have personalized that God. If we let go and let God, God's got to come through that door with a beard, a staff, sandals, caftan, or whatever they call it. And, you know, run up the dimensions for you and point the way and hit you on the head if you do wrong. But, of course, the thing that would happen is God would come through the door and reject you. Then you're rejected by God. But let me tell you, that's better than some people are getting. They're not getting any communication at all. And believe me, I'd rather God said, not you, kid, I'm not talking to you, rather than waiting for him and he doesn't say anything. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes poor communication is better than none at all. I know a lot of people said, oh, if I just know if my wife were, she died, but if I just know she was alive, if she would just communicate something to me. So she says, boy, am I glad I'm rid of you. He says, I don't believe that. She would never say that. She says, oh yeah, I would say it. I'm really glad I'm not with you anymore. She says, no, I don't believe it. God doesn't function that way. My wife doesn't function that way. When she was here, she did exactly everything I told her. She wouldn't dare say that, first of all. It's like, now she does dare because you can't hit her. And for you to get there, you've got to make some changes. And the changes you've got to make, you don't want to make. But where most of us find ourselves in our life, the place we want, we've got to make changes. But look, just because you're changing, that doesn't mean progress. You can change horizontally. You can just go from one bad marriage to another, to another, to another, from one job to another, to another, you know. I have a friend that's been married half a dozen times, and he's still married to his first wife. She just looks like all these other people and has different names. I said, that's just like your first wife. He says, isn't that the truth? And I said, yeah, it's the truth. He says, I'm having trouble with this one now. I said, why don't you go back and marry the first one? He says, I've thought about it. I said, so? And he says, yes, my present wife accuses me of that. I said, is she wrong? He said, well, if I told her what was on my mind, she'd leave me. But for the sake of the children, you've got to stay together, right? And he says, oh, yeah, it's for the children. It's for the children's sake. I said, so raise the children in a house of unhappiness and put all your emotional negativity on top of them. Beat them in the head. Don't give them a chance for happiness anywhere in the world. But do it for the children's sake. Are the children healthy? Oh, no, I have trouble. What's the trouble? Oh, cough and flu and this and headache and backache and throwing up. And well, where do you think they're getting that? So, I don't know. Say, is it epidemic? No, the only kids in the neighborhood, mine. How do you get along with your wife? Oh, we fight with the children around, when they're around or when they're not around. It doesn't matter. We're free. We fight when we feel like it. What do you fight over? Whichever way God is doing it. She says God's doing it that way, and I say God's doing it this way. I say, which way is God doing it? He says, well, that's what I'm here to do. I said, God isn't even involved in that. He doesn't have time to get in there. You're too busy. You've got to sit down and do a little listening for a while. You've got to shut up and observe your life, popularly called meditation. Hey, rare in meditation you hear anything. It's rare. And when you do, it's just your own mind chattering to you. So who wants to listen to that? I mean, you don't even want to listen to that, so why meditate? That's right, I don't blame you. I wouldn't want to meditate either. It's like, well, what should I do then? Well, what does your mind keep chattering to you about? Well, it says you didn't do the washing. Well, then go do the washing. Yeah, I don't want to do the washing. I want to meditate and see God. Well, hurry up and then go do the washing. And so they put in a lot of time, and the only thing they get out of it is calluses. Maybe not even that, because they won't sit that long. And not only that, they squirm too much. And not only that, that's distracting. And not only that, that doesn't do it. But it tells you one way that it doesn't work. At least you know one way. What's that? Your way. Your way doesn't work. It's like, don't you tell me that. I've been studying metaphysical stuff now for 40 years. You shouldn't say that, because that really dates you. Why? You probably didn't start till you're 20, 30. So that makes you 65 or 70. So you're an old one. Don't you think it's too late for you by now? If 30 years of what you study hasn't brought you anything but what has got you now, you better change. Oh, I'm too old to change. I'm too old. That's not even horizontal thinking. That's perpendicular going down. Do you know what's interesting, though? They can't even hold their attention on a thought. So I'm going to chant my mantra. So they sit and they start chanting it. Pretty soon it's like, uh-oh, the car, I got to get gas. See, it's gone already. That fast. Of course, you don't want to learn anything that's going to capture your attention. That makes you a slave. But you want to get involved in something where you can give your attention. And to give your attention, you've got to be in control of it. That's right. And how do you gain control of the focusing of awareness and attention? You say, but I don't know, I haven't done it yet. I mean, sometimes I just blank out. Then what do? I say, well, when I come back, I say, well, I really must have been someplace. I don't know a thing about it. Well, why do you say that? Why don't you say you haven't been anywhere and you still don't know anything about it? I said, but my ego wants to think that I've done something after being there for 4 hours. Why? Why give to your ego? It's just going to create defeat for you. It's going to create anxieties, animosities, depressions, insanities, your crazies. And then you're going to go back into another ego trip And it's going to produce all these things for you. And yet you say, I want to do it based upon how I feel about it, but your feelings have produced your depression now. But you still want to go and do it to your ego and do it all to your feelings, and that's going to still produce your depression, and you know it, and that's why you're afraid to do it. And that's why you're scared to death you're going to make some progress, because you won't know how to handle it. It's like, well, how do I get out of it? Well, let's move the depression to anxiety. Move the depression to anxiety? Sure. I know psychiatrists have been trying to learn that for a long time. If I could just get them out of the depression, slug them one, make them mad. It's like, well, you can't do that nowadays. Do you love them? Or are you just getting the money for them? And are you just caretaker? Or are you just babysitter? It's like, what are they depressed about? Well, things have gone so bad in their life. I said, well, what does that tell you? He says, well, they're always thinking what happened last month and last year, and they were so bad, and their last marriage was such a disaster, and the one before that was terrible. I said, that would depress me too. They've got a right to be depressed. It's like, they do? Yeah, don't you think you'd be depressed if you'd done everything like they did so badly? I say, yeah. Well, then don't try to get them out of their depression, because you can't. They've got it waterlogged against you. They've got their ego in there. They can hold against you until you fall apart. They can't. They'll outlast you. It's like, well, what am I going to do then? Tell them you're going to kick them out of here tomorrow. That'll give them anxiety. Then they're going to start worrying about tomorrow. Like, oh, where will I go tomorrow? Oh, my God, I'm so anxious. They're out of the depression. Then you treat anxiety. Well, that doesn't sound so crazy. We have a lot of people who do, professional counseling of a psychiatric, psychological, social nature. They listen to me crack a joke about something, they go out and try it, and they say, that was no joke. I said, I know it, that's why I was laughing so hard. It was the truth, but I didn't know if you'd have the wit to go do that. But if I told you, you wouldn't buy it because it didn't come out of your textbook, according to Dr. Freud, or Jung, or I was going to say Rogers, but maybe John Roger, who knows? So that's just fine with me. It doesn't bother my ego at all. It's like somebody says, so-and-so died. They said, was it anything serious? I say, no. Nothing serious. Is it ever anything serious? It depends on your concept about death. If you've been able to move your spiritual awareness beyond the bounds of your body and your imagination, your emotion, your mind, and the etheric, the unconscious, into the soul, and you keep that focus of attention, you've already died daily to be born again. And that being born again means you already have eternal life because you have eternal awareness. So when the body goes down, you say, there it goes, and you just keep right on with your awareness. But most people get trapped. They get trapped when that body shuts down the centers, and they have to fight to get out. And that fight produces some awful-looking things on people's faces. Sometimes we call it terror. Sometimes we call it horror, fear. But they're fighting to get out of the tomb. They're fighting for their next breath of air. And if you've ever seen somebody who's fought with asthma or emphysema to breathe, or somebody who's almost drowned, or if you've ever seen anybody being choked, or you've ever felt it yourself, and you start gasping for air, you're going after your very breath of life. But if you haven't been able to keep focused on that during the time of this life that you're here, then when you get ready to leave this sphere, and believe me, you're going to leave it. Everybody who died said, not me. Everyone who on the planet said, no, I'm going to live forever. You go down and it says rest in pieces. Not peace, because you don't rest in peace until you have gained the awareness of that eternality of your own existence. Not playing God. These people that play God are going to end up in a psychotic syndrome because they're going to have the guilts of all the people attached to them. but awakening to the very light that you already are. Instead of trying to set up your kingdom in God's kingdom and overthrowing God, you become aware that that form is present. And that awareness is a process of letting it do it. Then believe me, when you say, I let go and let God, you'll find out that God is doing it all anyway, and was even when you weren't letting go, and that's the sin, to fall short of the mark. And that mark is the awareness of the joy that we are, the bliss that is present. Not where you have to sit and space out with some form of asana. Not where you have to say, oh, I'm so happy, everybody. But you could sit and say, in the midst of my depression, I'm so darn happy the depression doesn't bother me anymore. It's like you may have a rock in your shoe and you're going to visit your lover and you don't have time to take the rock out. But it doesn't bother you because you're focused upon your love. And you completely transcend it.